What's up guys, welcome back to Paul's Hardware. Today I'm going to get back to doing that thing that I used to do all the time, which is help you guys build a new gaming PC.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by Kioxia's family of NVMe SSDs, featuring their latest BICS 3D flash memory. The BG5 now supports PCIe 4.0 and is still available in the incredibly small M.2 2230 form factor, so it's a great fit for gaming PCs, laptops, and compatible handheld gaming devices. And for enterprise or hyperscale data center use, the CD7 and XD6 feature the new EDSFF or Enterprise and Data Center Standard form factor for ease of integration, while the CD7 supports PCIe Gen 5 for maximum performance when paired with the latest AMD EPYC or Intel Xeon server hardware. For more on Kioxia SSDs, click the sponsor link in the video description.
So for anyone out there who is looking to build a new gaming PC or upgrade one, I have scraped together a bunch of deals today. Those are all linked in the video's description if you guys want to jump right to it. I also have a couple builds that I'm going to recommend to you guys. These are mid-range builds and they're similar to the ones I've been recommending for the past few months because I'm still kind of just getting used to the fact that I can say, hey, here's a mid-range gaming PC that performs quite well that actually costs less than $1,000. And if you've been following PC hardware pricing for the past year and a half to 2 years, you know that that hasn't been the case. And that's mostly due to graphics cards prices, which are still on the way down. They're not dropping quite as much as they were at the beginning of the year, but they're still on a downward trend. Before I get too far into the parts I've chosen, a quick recommendation. If you're actually about to build a computer and you want a tutorial on how to do that, check out my How to Build a Gaming PC playlist. I have multiple videos on both building the system itself and getting it set up, and even doing some streaming in my most recent one. I am updating these soon as well, so don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Now let's start off with sort of a higher level overview of what a mid-range gaming PC should cost. There is the low end, in my opinion, of what you can get right now. Then there's a little bit higher end if you start to add on things like more memory, a higher end graphics card, or maybe more storage, or maybe a higher wattage power supply. But this is sort of my generic list. If you're looking for a gaming PC, you're totally fine with a 6-core, 12-thread part right now, and a current gen CPU is probably where you want to go to get the latest technology. For graphics cards in the mid-range, they're going to cost you about $300 to $500, and I'm happy to say there's actually quite a few options in that range. For memory, you're totally fine with the 16 gig kit, which is two 8 gig sticks, but you can go with 32 gigs if you have need of additional memory. DDR4 3600 is a solid speed and memory standard to aim for both AMD and Intel right now, and that'll cost you $55 to $100. A mid-range motherboard will likely feature a mid-range chipset, which is B550 for AMD or B660 for Intel, and you can find solid boards for both platforms for around $130 to $160. A mid-tower case will cost you between $50 and $100. Storage is always easy to add and upgrade to a system, so you're welcome to take an existing maybe 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive that you have and add it to your system if you need more storage. But to get by and to get off the ground, you're going to need at least one SSD, and I recommend going with an M.2 NVMe one because that will give you better speeds for your operating system and whatnot. And a 512 gig again will get you by, but you can upgrade to 1 terabyte for $90 to $100. And then to complete the build, you'll need a power supply, and here I am recommending slightly more wattage than I was a year or two ago because the graphics cards that have been coming out with the current gen as well as the anticipated next gen later this year do seem to be a bit more power hungry, so you might want to aim for 650 to 750 watts, but there's still really good options in the $55 to $70 range. That brings your total up here to between $830 and $1,220, and I know that is a $400 swing, but bear in mind at least half of that is the graphics card, depending on what card you go with, and then you can easily add another $100 to $200 beyond that, but again, that would be doubling your memory from 16 to 32 gigs or doubling your storage from 512 to 1 terabyte. So with these price ranges in mind, what would an actual build look like, especially if we were trying to stick to the budget side of what's available? Here's our AMD build, which is going to be about $820 to $830 with the 5600 or 5600X, a Radeon RX 6600 graphics card, 16 gigs of DDR4, a B550 motherboard, a fairly budget case, a 512 gig SSD, and a 700 watt 80 plus bronze power supply. Back at the beginning of the year, almost this exact build would have been closer to $950 to $1,000, which is cool. And even since last month, prices have still come down maybe $20 to $30, so that's nice too. Meanwhile, for an Intel build, we have an i5-12400 for just shy of $200, that same RX 6600, a similar motherboard that's just a little bit more expensive, the same case, the same SSD, and the same power supply, and we're at $832. So this is what I recommend for most people for a mid-range gaming PC right now, but of course, as shown here, you can easily swap in parts here or there for, yes, a little bit more money, but also more performance. So now I will go over the individual components to just give a little bit more info on each one. First off, the Ryzen 5 5600. This is a slightly more recent launch from AMD, and I'm glad they've brought a little bit more budget options to the 5000 series. Of course, we are looking at the launch of the 7000 series, probably in just a few months, so do bear that in mind. That will be a complete platform change to AM5 instead of AM4. That will use DDR5 memory, so your upgrade path with this build is going to be limited to the Ryzen 5000 series CPUs that are available right now. That said, you have 8-core, 12-core, and 16-core options that you could potentially upgrade to down the road, but do not pay $200 for this. You can get it for $190 right now with this promo code, but that's probably because for $200 over on Amazon, you can just get a 5600X, which will run a little bit faster out of the box and still comes with a cooling solution, so you don't need to pay for that separately. So pick your poison, the 5600X for $200, the 5600 slightly slower for about $10 less. Here's our motherboard, the Gigabyte B550 Gaming X V2, which is $130. Very solid all-around board. It's got 4 DIMM slots so we can upgrade our memory in the future. It's got 2 M.2 slots so we can add more SSDs down the line if we want to. And it's even got some nicer features like a fixed I/O shield, and down here in the bottom right, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 front panel header. Now our Intel 6-core option is the i5-12400 right now, and there are some variants to this, like there's a 12500 that's clocked a little bit higher, but that does cost more. There's a 12400F that doesn't have integrated graphics, but I like having the integrated graphics. I think it's convenient to have. So unless you're getting a great deal for like $180 or less on the 12400F, I think the 12400 is the way to go. And look at this price competitiveness here. We have $193.96 on Amazon and $193.95 on Newegg. So obviously the choice should be clear for where to buy from there. Unfortunately, the Intel LGA 1700 motherboard options in the budget range aren't quite as varied as I think the B550 are on the AMD side. So we have this ASUS Prime board for $140. Do note that this would not be a good board to choose if you plan to upgrade to an unlocked overclockable CPU in the future, like a 12700K or especially a 12900K. The power delivery on this board is just not quite up to snuff, so please bear that in mind. This does still have the baseline features I would go for though, like 4 DIMM slots, of course, and it does have that USB 3.2 Gen 2 front panel header. That said, I've got a couple other B660 boards linked in the description if you do have your sights set on a higher end Intel CPU down the line, or if you want to maybe upgrade to Rocket Lake when it launches later this year. These are about $30 more though at $170, but again, both of these are linked in the description. And bear in mind, those are both micro-ATX boards, so you probably would want to go with the micro-ATX case too. Let's move on to memory. Here we don't care as much about the AMD versus Intel. Both of the platforms can use DDR4 as long as with Intel right now you choose a DDR4 compatible motherboard. The Intel CPUs do work with DDR5, but DDR5 is still very overpriced right now and you don't get much added performance from it, especially if you're looking at gaming. And just look what crazy deals you can get on DDR4. This is the Team Group 16 gig kit that I've recommended for a couple months now. I'm still recommending it because the price has dropped down to $55 from $60, and it's a pretty simple gray design that should blend in with your build. If you don't buy this kit specifically, at least keep it in mind as a starting off point if you're comparing prices of other kits, because prices can ramp up pretty significantly, pretty quickly. And even if you're just looking at doubling your memory capacity to 32 gigs instead of 16, which is great if you're looking at doing something like video editing, for example, it's only $96 for the 32 gig variant of this kit. If you have your sights set on like RGB memory or something like that, just contrast that to the price of this and consider, is it worth $150 for a kit that's essentially the same performance and the same capacity as something like this, just because it has RGB? Of course it is. RGB is very important. Maybe you think that, maybe you don't. Next, let's talk about storage. You do need to have storage in your system, and if you haven't been into PC building for a while, let me update you on our progress. We went from just using mechanical hard drives, I don't know, 10 plus years ago, to SSDs, or solid state drives, which are much faster and more responsive than mechanical drives. Mechanical drives will typically top out at maybe 150 to 300 megabytes per second in terms of read and write speeds. SATA SSDs like this 2.5-inch one can get up to 500 to 550 megabytes per second, and again, the response time also is much faster than mechanical drives. So it's at least recommended to use one of these for your main operating system drive, and then you can supplement additional storage by adding more mechanical drives, more 2.5-inch SSDs. The newest storage drives are still SSDs, but they use an M.2 form factor. This is specifically M.2 2280, which is 22 millimeters wide and 80 millimeters long. These are kind of like stick of gum drives, and they typically adhere to the newer NVMe standard rather than the SATA standard, which again means they can be much faster and are a much better option for your main operating system drive, and then supplement supplement additional storage in your system with SSDs and mechanicals. The limitations of these drives are going to be the available slots you have on your motherboard. Most motherboards are only going to have 1, 2, or maybe 3 slots available for them. And if you get a really high-end one, especially a PCIe 4.0 drive, they can get hot and sometimes require cooling to prevent throttling. That said, the speeds on these drives can get way faster than SATA, which again top out at 500 to 550 megabytes per second. At the low end, you'll typically see 1200 to 1600 megabytes per second read and write speeds on these drives. High-end PCIe 3.0 drives can push around 3000 to 3500 megabytes per second. And then if you get into PCIe 4.0 drives, you're looking at 4500 to 5000 megabytes per second. And then PCIe 5.0 drives are starting to come out as well. But if you're looking at a budget build, you probably don't need to worry about that. The other nice thing is that these drives have been out for so long now that they're pretty stinking affordable. A 512 gig Team Group MP33 is now $43, down from like 45 or something like that. Again, this is down towards the lower end of NVMe SSDs, but still 1400 to 1700 megabytes per second reads and writes. The 1 terabyte version of this drive is down to $74, and look, even the 2 terabyte version of this drive is $150. That is also a really good deal. Here's another good deal on a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD. This is an ADATA XPG SX8100. This gets towards the top end of PCIe 3.0 drives, so we're looking at 3500 megabytes per second reads and 3000 megabytes per second writes. And it's actually 80 bucks if you clip this coupon and get an extra $10 off the $90 it's listed for. And I threw in a 2 terabyte SATA drive in the list below as well. This is a Team Group one. This is not going to be the fastest of available SATA drives, but it's got reads up to 550 megabytes per second, and it's $130 for a 2 terabyte drive. So this would be a great storage drive for your games collection, your Steam library, for example. All right, let's run down the rest of the parts. For cases, I'm still showing off the Fractal Design Focus G just as a basic entry-level case. I have a build I've already done in this case if you want to check it out. And the reason I bring this up is this is sort of my baseline for an ATX case. You can spend more money on this for something that might look a little bit different, but it's a full-size ATX case, so it'll fit full-size motherboards. It comes with a couple fans, so it has airflow built in. It has mesh on the front, so it has good airflow. And it does have a side panel window. It's not tempered glass, it's plexi, so that is part of the reason it's not very expensive. But I do have a really solid upgrade to that today. This is a great deal, a case that's usually in the $150 to $160 range, currently selling for $90. This is the LandCool 205. It's available in white. It's got the mesh front. It comes with 3 RGB fans, which look super cool. It's got tempered glass side panel window instead of the plexi. It has a built-in RGB controller as well, which can be convenient depending on the motherboard that you go with. And it doesn't have that USB 3.2 Gen 2 port, but I believe this little slot here, you can buy that as an add-on cable from Lian Li and add it to the system if you really want to. And even less money, down to $84, although they're selling out soon, is the black version of it, which is pretty much the same as the white version, except it's black. And they do have the black and white version, and it's also $90, although this one doesn't have the mesh front panel. I'd prefer the mesh front panel for airflow. All right, let's talk power supplies. Again, I'm recommending slightly higher wattage power supplies than I was last year because we're looking at higher power draw for the graphics cards currently and the graphics cards that we're expecting to come out. When determining how much wattage you need for your power supply, look at the graphics card you're going to get. There will be a recommended wattage for that. So like for the RTX 3080, for example, they recommend a 750 watt power supply. So either go with that or you can maybe shoot for 100 watts more. And if you do plan to upgrade your graphics card down the line, then there's no shame in spending an extra $15 or $20 and getting more wattage out of the gate for your budget system, just so you know you can drop in that new GPU and not have to worry about upgrading your power supply too, because that's a really big pain in the butt. And look, for $55, you can get a 700 watt, 80 plus bronze rated EVGA unit. This one is not modular or anything fancy like that. It's really all about the fact that it's 700 watts and it's $55. 80 plus bronze rated for efficiency means it's decently efficient, but not the most out there. You can upgrade to an 80 plus gold unit. This one's 650 watt for $60. It's only $5 more, 50 watts less in power output, but this one's also partially modular, which is also a very convenient feature for power supplies. And yes, all the cables in all these power supplies I'm recommending are all black, so you can plug them in and they won't stand out and look garish in your build through your side panel window. If you do have your sights set on like an RTX 3080 or something like that, just $10 more for the 750 watt version. Or I have a link directly to the EVGA website, and they have been having some really crazy deals on power supplies recently. And they have 600 watts for $55, 650 watts for $60, 750 watts for $70, and so on. And now let's talk about what's probably going to be the most expensive part in your build, the graphics card. And again, prices have been coming down a little bit, and on the AMD side, or AMD Radeon graphics cards, there's actually some good deals and some cards that are actually below MSRP, which is kind of unprecedented. So if you're looking looking for bang for your buck, you don't already have a G-Sync monitor, which you'd really need an NVIDIA graphics card in order to properly use, and you're not particularly enamored with ray tracing, which the NVIDIA cards do perform better at with the current generation that's out, then I would say opt for AMD if you're looking for a deal that's less than $500 on a GPU. I do not necessarily recommend the 6500 XT. It is still linked in the description because it is below MSRP. MSRP is $200. Myself and many other reviewers thought that was too much for this card, giving some of its shortcomings. I'll link to that video if you want to know what its shortcomings are. Fortunately, one of those big ones, which is the PCIe 4.0x4 connection, won't be a factor if you're building one of the systems that I recommended today, because both of the systems are PCIe 4.0 compatible. That said, I only recommend this if you're really on a budget and really need a graphics card. It is $180, which is about 20 bucks below MSRP. And the other shameful thing is that it only has 2 video outs, and I note that they have carefully not shown the video outs on this card in any of the pictures because they're ashamed. A much better performing card is the RX 6600. And those are costing around 300 bucks. This one has a promo code right now that brings it below $300. MSRP for the 6600 is actually $330. This one's down to $290 if you include this promo code. But word of warning, this is a light edition video card, which again means the video outs, there's only 2 video outs. And again, they don't like to show the pictures of that specifically. But there are other 6600s that are maybe, you know, just at 300 bucks, like this one, that aren't the light edition. Wait, this is supposed to be $300. This is supposed to be from the XFX store. Maybe they raised the price, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter because just go to Amazon. They have the same card for $300 right there. So use my Amazon link, not the Newegg link. I'm not sure where the XFX listing for that on Newegg went, but yeah, 300 bucks, and I'd much rather pay $10 more for this card than the light edition I showed you a moment ago. I also have an ASRock card here for some reason. Why? Oh, because if you start spending $310, $320, $330 for an RX 6600, then you start to bump into the 6600 XT, which is a nice upgrade in base performance, and you can find those now as cheap as $360. Still an XFX Speedster Swift 210, but these cards are just fine, even though the picture here looks a little squished for some reason, I'm not sure. But $360 is another decent price drop on that from just a month or two ago. Part of the reason is that the 6650 XT is now out. That has a $400 retail price, and it is selling for $400. So yes, it is faster than the 6600 XT. It is more expensive as well, but just consider that price if you're looking at 6600 XTs that start getting towards $400, because then you're probably better off going with the 6650. And I'm also happy to say that amongst the sub $500 AMD Radeon cards, we now have the 6700 XT as well, currently available in the Mech 2X edition from MSI for $484 over on Amazon. And look at that, they showed a picture of the video outs because they're not ashamed, because there's actually a full complement of 4 of them. So real solid choices in the $300 to $500 range for AMD Radeon cards right now. Like I said, the NVIDIA cards are still just a little bit overpriced. I was gonna go for budget options, but like the RTX 3050 is about $320 right now. There's no way you should buy that over the RX 6600. And if you want to step up from there, you get to the RTX 3060. The cheapest RTX 3060 is now less than $400. Again, that's good news. That's down from what it used to be. But MSRP for this is supposed to be $330, so it's still well above that. And in terms of baseline performance, you're still gonna get better bang for the buck going with a 6600 XT or a 6650 XT or a 6700 XT. And look, they even have the audacity to call this a shell shocker right now, and it's actually probably not even gonna be on sale anymore because it ends in 10 hours and this video is probably not gonna be up by then. But I think there's some other RTX 3060s for 400 bucks too. The RTX 3070 is supposed to MSRP for $500. It's $600 and there's a $10 off promo code, which again is a good deal on an RTX 3070 based on the last year or so, but not a good deal if you compare to AMD's offerings, or of course the MSRP. This is a nice one because again, less than 500 bucks, $10 more off with this promo code. And this isn't like a baseline entry-level card. This is the Gigabyte Vision version, which is white. Looks pretty nice. I've used a couple of these cards before. They're solid cards and they have good coolers too. The 3070 Ti is still 700 bucks. The good thing there isn't that the prices come down any further, it's just that there's more cards now available at $700. The ASUS TUF Gaming is there. The Gigabyte Gaming version is also $700. I believe the Gigabyte Eagle was also listed for $700 too. This one also is supposed to retail for $600, so it's still 100 bucks marked up, as is the RTX 3080. But the RTX 3080 has this rebate card, which brings this one at least to $770. This is the closest to a $700 RTX 3080 that I feel like I've seen since the RTX 3080 launched. And this is the MSI Ventus version, which is a pretty good card. good cooler, triple fan cooling solution, and you may or may not take that rebate card into account. So as you can see, I had to go above $500 to find the quote-unquote reasonable mid-range NVIDIA cards. I really wish NVIDIA prices would continue to drop as the AMD prices have, and who knows, maybe they will continue to do so as the summer progresses, because summer's just started. Things get a little warm, which is part of the reason I need to finish this video, because it's getting warm right here, right now as well. If you are on the hunt for PC parts, I recommend checking camel.com for price histories for places like Amazon. I also recommend PC Part Picker, where you can go to a PC Builder and choose your CPU and other components there, and that's where I derived some of the prices from today's video. But guys, that's all the time I have for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and links to pretty much all the parts I talked about should be down in the video's description if you're interested. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button on your way out, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos on building PCs and choosing the right parts to build with. One last recommendation before I go: if you want to help support my channel, you can check out my store at paulshardware.net, where I have shirts, mugs, pint glasses, all manner of high quality merchandise available there. Once again, that's paulshardware.net. We've got some new designs coming at you real soon too. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you all in the next video.